I should have kept driving, but the sound of the train horn cut through the night like a warning meant for me. My shift at St. Mary's had ended 40 minutes earlier, and exhaustion pressed behind my eyes as I steered my 10-year-old Honda down the service road that ran parallel to the tracks. Lily was asleep in the back seat, her small sneakers kicked off, her backpack half open beside her. It was 11:42 p.m., and all I wanted was my couch and 4 hours of quiet before doing it all again. Then I saw him. At first, I thought it was debris caught near the rails, something left behind by maintenance crews. But the closer my headlights swept across the gravel, the more wrong it looked. A man, lying on his side, hands secured behind him. The steel rails beneath him began to hum, a low vibration that traveled up through the soles of my shoes when I stepped out of the car. I froze. The crossing signal half a mile down had started flashing red. The train would be here in less than a minute. Mom. Lily's sleepy voice drifted from the back seat. What's happening? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the man lifted his head, and even in the dim light I saw his eyes. Sharp, steady, not panicked the way anyone else would be. He wasn't begging. He wasn't shouting. He was watching me. The horns sounded again, louder now, echoing across the empty stretch of industrial land. I should have called 911. I should have driven away and told myself it wasn't my responsibility. But I'm a nurse. We don't drive away. My hands trembled as I reached into my scrub pocket and pulled out the small trauma scissors I carried for cutting bandages. The gravel shifted under my sneakers as I ran toward him. The rails were vibrating harder now, the headlight in the distance growing brighter, swallowing the darkness. I dropped to my knees beside him, fingers clumsy against the restraints. I'm going to get you off, I whispered, not sure if I was reassuring him or myself. He didn't speak. He just held my gaze, something unreadable flickering there. The scissors sliced through the last binding just as the wind from the approaching train hit us, hot and violent. I grabbed his arm and pulled with everything I had. We stumbled. Off the tracks, rolling onto the gravel as the train thundered past, so close I felt it in my bones. For a moment, all I could hear was metal and air and my own heartbeat. Then silence. Heavy. Final. I pushed myself up on shaking arms and turned toward him. Up close, he looked expensive. Tailored coat. Polished shoes dusted in gravel. A thin silver watch that caught the flashing red lights from the crossing signal. Not a drifter. Not careless. Powerful. Are you hurt? I asked, my voice barely steady. He studied me like I was the unexpected variable in a calculation he hadn't solved yet. Before he could answer, headlights appeared at the end of the service road. Not one car. 3 black SUVs, moving fast, deliberate. They stopped in a line, engines idling. Doors opened in perfect unison. Men stepped out, dressed in dark suits despite the cold. One of them hurried forward. Mr. Romano, he said, relief thick in his voice. Romano. The name landed between us like something heavy. I looked back at the man I'd just dragged off the tracks, and for the first time, I understood. I hadn't saved a stranger tonight. I had saved someone the entire city knew by reputation alone. The men moved around him like orbiting planets, controlled and precise, but he did not take his eyes off me. Gravel crunched under polished shoes as one of them offered him a dark wool coat. He did not put it on. Are you injured, sir? The same man asked. Sir. Not Mr. Romano this time. Sir carried weight. Authority. The kind that did not need to be raised. I am fine, he replied calmly, his voice low, steady, almost detached, as if being left on railroad tracks was a minor inconvenience. His gaze shifted past me to my car. You should not have stopped. It was not a reprimand. It sounded more like a fact. I swallowed, suddenly aware of Lily standing a few feet away in her pink pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Mom, she whispered, pressing into my side. Are those his friends? Friends felt like the wrong word. The men glanced at her, their expressions softening for half a second before returning to something unreadable. Protective. Alert. Watching everything. I stepped slightly in front of Lily without thinking. The man called Romano noticed. His eyes flickered with something I could not name. Approval, maybe. Or surprise. You saved my life, he said, finally directing the words at me instead of around me. The train crossing lights were still flashing red behind us, bathing his face in a pulse of color that made him look carved from stone. Anyone would have done the same, I answered, even though I knew that was not true. I had almost kept driving. The wind tugged at my jacket. My hands were still shaking, though I tried to hide it by adjusting Lily's hood. "No," he said quietly. "Not anyone." One of the men stepped closer. "We need to leave. This location is not secure." The phrase sounded rehearsed. I felt the temperature drop, not in the air, but in the space between us. Not secure meant something larger than a random accident. It meant intention. It meant someone had wanted him there. Romano stood slowly, brushing gravel from his sleeve with deliberate movements. Even disheveled, he carried himself like he was in control of the night, not a victim of it. "What is your name?" he asked. "Claire Bennett." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "And this is Lily." Lily peeked around me. "Hi," she said, small but brave. He crouched slightly to meet her eye level, careful, measured. "Thank you for sharing your mother with me tonight," he told her. His tone softened in a way that startled me. Lily studied him with the blunt honesty of a 6-year-old. "You should not lay on train tracks," she said. One corner of his mouth lifted, almost a smile. "I will remember that." Headlights flashed again as one of the SUVs repositioned, engines humming like restrained power. I suddenly understood how out of place my dented Honda looked among them. I felt it then, the shift. The invisible line between my world and his. Fluorescent hospital corridors. Overdue bills. Microwave dinners. And whatever empire required men in tailored suits to appear in under 2 minutes. "You are not safe here," he said, rising to his full height. "And because of me, you may not be safe tomorrow." My pulse stumbled. What does that mean? He held my gaze, not threatening, not pleading, simply honest. "It means someone intended for me not to survive tonight. And you interfered." Lily's fingers tightened in my coat. I forced myself not to. "Step back. We were just driving home," I said. "Then allow me to ensure you arrive there," he replied. It was not a request. It was a promise. I did not argue when the SUVs followed us. I told myself it was temporary, just an escort until we reached my apartment on the east side, just under 12 miles from the tracks. The convoy moved like a shadow behind my old Honda, headlights steady in my rearview mirror, never too close, never too far. Lily had fallen asleep again, her cheek pressed against the window, unaware that our quiet life had just been divided into before and after. My hand stayed tight on the steering wheel. Every red light felt louder. Every passing car felt suspicious. When I finally turned into my apartment complex, I wished for the first time that the parking lot had better lighting. The security lamp near my building flickered the way it always did, buzzing like it might give up at any second. I parked in my usual spot. The SUVs stopped at the entrance, engines idling. They did not pull in. Romano stepped out of the center vehicle. Even from 30 yards away, he stood out against the dim concrete and peeling paint of my building. Power did not blend in. It altered whatever space it entered. He approached slowly as I lifted Lily from the back seat. She stirred but did not wake. I felt his presence before he spoke. "This is where you live," he said, not judgmental, just observant. I shifted Lily higher on my hip. "Yes." The word felt small. My building had cracked brick and narrow balconies with rusted railings. It smelled like laundry detergent and someone else's cooking most nights. It was not dangerous. It was ordinary. He looked up at the dark windows, scanning them with the same intensity he had used on the railroad tracks. "Do you have family nearby?" he asked. "No." I adjusted Lily's blanket. "It is just us." Something moved in his expression at that. Not pity. Calculation. Responsibility. "You should not be alone tonight," he said quietly. I felt a flicker of irritation push through my fear. "With respect, Mr. Romano, I do not even know you." The corner of his mouth shifted slightly. "Adrian," he corrected. "And you are correct. You do not." He took a step back, giving me space, instead of closing it. The gesture surprised me more than anything else had. "But someone made a decision to place me on those tracks," he continued. "That decision required planning. It required confidence. If they learn that you were there, that you intervened, they may see you as a variable." A variable. I understood that word. In medicine, variables changed outcomes. Sometimes they saved lives. Sometimes they complicated them. "You are saying that by helping you, I stepped into something larger than I understood." "Yes." The honesty in his voice was unfiltered. I searched his face for exaggeration. I did not find any. The parking lot was quiet except for the low hum of the SUVs. One of his men remained near the entrance, watching the street. Not aggressive, just aware. What are you suggesting? I asked. Adrian's gaze dropped briefly to Lily, then returned to me. Allow my people to remain nearby for a few days, he said. Unseen, unintrusive, until I resolve what began tonight. I hesitated. Pride told me to refuse. Survival told me to listen. And after that? I asked. His eyes held mine steadily. After that, I repay my debt. The way he said it did not sound like money. It sounded like something permanent. I shifted Lily again, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing against my shoulder. My life had always been predictable. Hospital shifts, school drop-offs, grocery lists. Now a man who commanded a fleet of black vehicles stood in front of my building asking to protect me. I should have said no. Instead, I heard myself whisper, 3 days. Adrian nodded once, as if we had just finalized a contract neither of us fully understood. 3 days, he agreed, and the way he looked at me made it clear that this was only the beginning. The first night passed without sleep. I lay awake on my couch with the lamp off, listening to the unfamiliar silence between ordinary sounds. The refrigerator hummed. Pipes clicked behind the walls. A car drove past every few minutes. And beneath all of it, there was something else. A presence. Not inside my apartment, but close enough to feel. Around 2 a.m, I parted the curtain by half an inch. A black SUV sat across the street, engine off, lights dark. It did not look threatening. It looked patient. Lily slept in my bed because she said her room felt cold. I did not tell her that I felt it too. By morning, the world pretended nothing had shifted. The sun came up pale and thin through the blinds. I made oatmeal. I braided Lily's hair. I packed her lunch with apple slices and peanut butter crackers. My hands moved through routine like muscle memory, but my mind replayed the vibration of steel under my shoes and the way Adrian's eyes had held mine. At 8:15, I walked Lily to the front entrance of her elementary school. The building smelled like crayons and disinfectant. Children ran past us with backpacks too large for their shoulders. Ordinary. Safe. I tried to believe that word still applied. When I turned back toward the parking lot, I saw it again. The same SUV from the night before. Parked 2 rows away. Windows tinted. Unmoving. My pulse jumped. The driver stepped out slowly, hands visible, expression neutral. Ms. Bennett, he said politely. We are here as instructed. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. You will not see us unless necessary. Necessary. I nodded once, unsure whether I was grateful or irritated. Please keep your distance from the school, I said quietly. He inclined his head. Understood. I drove to the hospital with the strange awareness of being followed and protected at the same time. In the staff parking garage, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead. I gathered my bag and stepped out. Another vehicle waited near the entrance ramp. Not close, just present. I told myself it was temporary. 3 days. I could handle 3 days. But as I moved through my shift, checking vitals, adjusting 4 lines, offering quiet reassurances to anxious families, I felt the edge of something larger brushing against my normal life. At noon, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Claire Bennett. You are at work? Adrian's voice said on the other end. Not a question. A confirmation. My heart stuttered. Yes. There was a brief pause, the faint sound of traffic in the background. My people have confirmed there has been no unusual activity near your residence, he said. However, I prefer not to rely on absence as proof of safety. I leaned against the supply counter, lowering my voice. You promised 3 days. And I will honor that, he replied. But I need you to understand something. His tone shifted slightly. Not colder. More personal. The men who planned last night underestimated one factor. I swallowed. What factor? Silence lingered for a breath. You. The words settled heavily in my chest. I closed my eyes briefly. I am not part of your world, I said. You are now. He answered, not as a threat, but as truth. I looked down at my hands, steady as always. The same hands that bandaged wounds and held frightened children. The same hands that cut through rope under a rushing headlight. I had told myself I stepped into his story for a single moment. But as the day stretched on and his presence lingered like a shadow I could not shake, I began to realize something far more unsettling. Maybe his world had not collided with mine. Maybe it had been waiting. By the second night, the silence felt heavier than the noise. I finished my shift just after 7 in the evening, the sky already fading into that deep blue that makes the city lights look sharper than they are. I walked to my car with my keys threaded between my fingers, a habit I had developed long before any of this. The parking garage echoed with every step. When I reached my Honda, I paused. A black sedan sat 2 spaces away. Not close enough to intimidate. Close enough to remind me. I told myself it was protection. I told myself that word until it almost sounded comforting. Lily was at home with Mrs. Alvarez from downstairs, who had agreed to watch her for an hour while I picked up groceries. I drove the 3 miles to the store, aware of headlights that followed but never overtook me. Inside, everything felt painfully normal. Shopping carts squeaked. A toddler cried in aisle 4. I reached for a gallon of milk and caught my reflection in the freezer door. I looked the same. Same brown hair pulled back. Same tired eyes. But there was something sharper behind them now. Awareness. When I stepped back into the parking lot, the air had cooled. I loaded the bags into my trunk and turned, only to see Adrian standing a few feet away. No convoy. No visible security. Just him, hands in the pockets of a dark coat, watching me with that steady, measuring gaze. My heart reacted before my mind did. You said your people would stay unseen, I said quietly. They are, he replied. I am not. I closed the trunk with more force than necessary. You should not be here. He tilted his head slightly. I wanted to see the environment you move through every day. His eyes scanned the strip mall, the cracked pavement, the flickering neon sign above the laundromat next door. It is honest. I let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh. That is one word for it. He stepped closer, but not enough to crowd me. There has been movement, he said, his voice lower now. Questions asked. About a nurse. About a child. My chest tightened. You said there was no unusual activity. There was not, he answered. Until this afternoon. The world around us continued as if nothing had shifted. A shopping cart rolled past unattended. Someone unlocked their car with a distant beep. This is exactly what I did not want, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My daughter did not choose this. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Nor did you. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The distance between our worlds felt smaller out here under fluorescent lights. He did not look like a legend or a rumor. He looked like a man who had come too close to losing control. I can relocate you temporarily, he said. Somewhere secure. Comfortable. Private. I shook my head immediately. Lily has school. I have work. We cannot disappear because of something we did not start. His eyes searched mine, not for weakness, but for resolve. I did not look away. Finally, he nodded once. Then I will bring the security closer. I felt the weight of that promise. Adrian, I said softly, testing his name again. He stilled at the sound of it. I do not want to live behind walls. His expression shifted, something almost conflicted passing through it. Walls are sometimes the only thing standing between safety and regret, he said. I thought of the railroad tracks, of the vibration under my feet, of how close everything had come to ending. And sometimes, I replied, they keep out the wrong things. His gaze held mine for a long moment, the air between us charged but steady. Then he stepped back, giving me space again. 3 days, he reminded me quietly. But this time it sounded less like a limit and more like a countdown. The 3rd morning arrived with rain. Not a storm, just a steady gray drizzle that made everything outside my window look blurred at the edges. Lily complained about her sneakers getting wet, and I knelt by the door to double knot the laces, trying to keep my hands steady. I had barely slept. Every car door that shut outside during the night had sounded like a signal. Every passing engine had felt like a message I did not understand. When we stepped into the parking lot, the air smelled like wet asphalt. The black SUV was closer than it had been yesterday. Not blocking, just present. I felt it in my chest before I saw him. Adrian stood under the overhang near the stairwell, no umbrella, rain collecting on the shoulders of his dark coat. He looked out of place against peeling paint and rusted railings, like a headline printed across a grocery receipt. You are adjusting, he said quietly as we approached. I did not know whether it was a compliment or an observation. I do not have a choice, I replied. Lily looked up at him, tilting her head. Why are you always here now? She asked with the blunt honesty only a child can manage. He crouched slightly, so they were closer to eye level. Because your mother is brave, he answered. And sometimes brave people need backup. Lily considered that seriously. Like superheroes. He paused, And for the first time since I met him, I saw something soften without calculation. Something like that. I guided Lily toward the car. We are going to be late. He straightened, stepping back to give us space, but his gaze followed us until I shut the driver door. As I pulled out of the lot, I caught his reflection in my side mirror. Still watching. At the hospital, the tension felt thicker. I could not explain it. Nurses whispered more than usual. Security stood at the front desk instead of near the emergency entrance. Around 10:30, my supervisor called me into her office. "Claire," she began carefully, "have you been contacted by anyone unusual this week?" My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" She folded her hands on the desk. "Two men in suits asked about your schedule yesterday. They did not identify themselves clearly." The room felt smaller. "Did they say what?" "They said they were conducting a background verification." She studied my face. "Is there something you need to tell me?" I thought of Adrian's words in the parking lot. Questions asked. About a nurse. About a child. "No," I said slowly. "Nothing that affects my work." She nodded, but her concern lingered. "Just be careful." Careful. The word echoed long after I left her office. When my shift ended, I stepped outside and immediately spotted the familiar sedan. But there was another vehicle across the street. Older. Beige. Windows partially lowered despite the rain. It had not been there this morning. My pulse quickened. I walked to my car without looking directly at it, but I felt the weight of attention like static on my skin. Before I could reach for my door handle, Adrian's voice came from behind me. "Do not get in." I turned. He was already moving toward the beige car, not rushed, not aggressive, just deliberate. The sedan's engine started abruptly, tires hissing on wet pavement as it pulled away. Adrian stopped at the curb, watching it disappear. The rain dampened his hair, darkening it. When he looked back at me, there was no panic in his expression, only confirmation. "It begins," he said quietly. And in that moment, I understood something that chilled me more than the rain ever could. The 3 days we agreed on were never meant to protect me from his world. They were meant to prepare me for it. The rain had stopped by the time we reached my apartment complex, but the air still felt charged, like the sky had not decided whether it was finished with us. I parked without speaking. Adrian's vehicle stopped behind mine. Closer now, no pretense of distance. I stepped out slowly, scanning the lot the way I had seen his men do. The beige sedan was not there. That did not comfort me. Adrian approached, his expression controlled but alert. "They are testing boundaries," he said quietly. "Not attacking. Not yet. Measuring." I folded my arms across my chest, more to steady myself than to shield against the cold. "You speak about this like it is a chess game." His gaze met mine. "It is." The simplicity of his answer unsettled me more than anything dramatic could have. I unlocked my apartment door and turned to him. "You said 3 days. Today is the 3rd, he replied. I hesitated. Inside, Lily was already at the kitchen table coloring, humming softly, unaware that her world had shifted coordinates. Adrian stepped just inside the doorway when I allowed it, his presence filling the narrow space without overwhelming it. He looked around carefully, taking in the worn couch, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, Lily's drawings taped to the refrigerator. His eyes lingered on one of them, a crayon sketch of a house with a sun in the corner. "She draws light," he said. I did not know why that observation tightened my throat. "She has not seen enough darkness to draw otherwise," I answered. His expression changed at that, subtle but real. "I intend to keep it that way." I turned to face him fully. "You cannot promise that." He did not look offended. "I can promise effort." Lily looked up from her coloring book and spotted him. "Are you staying for dinner?" she asked casually, as if he were a neighbor instead of a man with an empire of shadows trailing behind him. Adrian paused. He looked at me first, silently asking permission. I surprised myself by nodding. "It is just pasta," I said. He removed his coat and draped it carefully over the back of a chair that had seen better days. The sight of him in my kitchen felt unreal, like two photographs layered on top of each other that did not belong in the same frame. As I stirred the pot, he stood near the counter, not touching anything, not asserting control, just observing. "The sedan today," I said quietly so Lily would not hear. "That was not random." "No," he answered. "It was deliberate." "And what happens next?" He did not respond immediately. He watched Lily as she described a drawing of a tree with bright green leaves. "Next," he said finally, "I remove the uncertainty." The way he said it carried weight, but not threat. I set 3 plates on the table. And when you remove it, does your world return to normal? He met my eyes across the small kitchen. My world does not have normal, he said softly. It has balance. I sat down across from him, Lily between us, talking about school and spelling tests as if nothing beyond these walls existed. For a few minutes, the space felt almost peaceful. But beneath that fragile calm, I felt the shift clearly now. The 3rd day had arrived, and instead of counting down to his departure, I realized something far more dangerous. I was no longer certain I wanted him to leave. After dinner, the apartment felt smaller than usual, like the walls had shifted closer while we were not looking. Lily insisted on showing Adrian her spelling workbook, carefully sounding out each word while he listened with a patience that did not match the reputation I had built in my mind. He did not check his phone. He did not glance toward the door. He stayed focused on her, nodding at the right moments, asking gentle questions that made her sit a little straighter in her chair. I watched him the way I watched patients in recovery, looking for signs of strain beneath the surface. Instead, I saw something else. Restraint. When Lily finally yawned, I carried her to bed, tucking the blanket under her chin the way I always did. Is he staying? She whispered sleepily. I hesitated. Not tonight, I said softly. She seemed satisfied with that answer and closed her eyes. When I returned to the kitchen, Adrian was standing by the window, looking out into the dark parking lot. The black SUV was still there, engine off, silent and steady. You could leave now, I said quietly. 3 days are over. He did not turn immediately. If I leave, he replied. The message sent today becomes permission. I leaned against the counter, folding my arms. Permission for what? He faced me then, and the air between us shifted again, heavier, more personal. For them to believe you are unprotected. I swallowed. And if I stay under your protection? Then they understand that touching your life means touching mine. The simplicity of it unsettled me. You talk about this like I am already part of your territory. His gaze softened slightly. You are not territory. The correction was immediate. You are the reason I am standing here. Silence settled between us, but it was not uncomfortable. It was aware. I moved closer to the window, standing beside him. Outside, the parking lot looked ordinary again. A few dim lights. Empty spaces. The faint glow from neighboring buildings. I do not want Lily growing up thinking men solve everything with power, I said quietly. Then do not let her think that, he replied. Let her see that power can choose restraint. The word surprised me. And you? I asked. Do you always choose restraint? He held my gaze without flinching. Not always. The honesty in that answer felt heavier than any lie would have. A car drove slowly past the entrance of the lot, headlights sweeping across the walls before disappearing. My pulse jumped, then steadied. Adrian noticed. Fear sharpens instinct, he said. But it should not control you. I looked at him, really looked at him. Not the tailored coat or the measured posture. The faint lines at the corners of his eyes. The exhaustion he did not voice. You almost died, I said softly. Does that frighten you? For the first time since I met him, he looked away. Just for a second. No, he answered. Then his eyes returned to mine. Losing control does. The confession hung between us. I understood that more than I wanted to. Control was how I kept my life stable. My schedule. My routines. My careful boundaries. He stepped back, giving me space once more. Tomorrow, I will address what began this, he said. After that, you will decide whether I remain in your world. The choice felt heavier than the threat ever had. As he moved toward the door, I realized something I had been avoiding. The danger outside no longer unsettled me as much as the shift inside. Because somewhere between the railroad tracks and this quiet kitchen, the most dangerous thing had not been his enemies. It had been the way I was starting to trust him. The next morning felt too quiet, like the air was holding its breath. Adrian had left just after midnight, but the sense of him remained, threaded through the silence of my apartment. I barely slept. When my alarm went off at 6, I was already awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying his last words. Tomorrow, I will address what began this. I moved through my routine carefully, aware that this was no longer just about caution. It was about awareness. Lily padded into the kitchen in her socks, rubbing her eyes. Is the superhero coming back? She asked as she climbed onto her chair. I forced a small smile. He is busy today. She nodded as if that made perfect sense. Children accept complicated truths when they are framed simply. Adults do. Not. When we stepped outside, the parking lot looked ordinary again. No SUV in sight. No visible shadow. The absence should have relieved me. Instead, it unsettled me more than presence ever had. I drove Lily to school, scanning intersections without meaning to. Nothing followed us. Nothing lingered. The world moved normally. Too normally. At the hospital, the atmosphere felt lighter than yesterday. No whispered conversations. No unfamiliar faces near the entrance. My supervisor did not call me in. If Adrian had done something, he had done it quietly. That thought both reassured and frightened me. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Not an unknown number this time. His name appeared on the screen. Adrian. I stepped into an empty supply room before answering. Is it finished? I asked without greeting. There was a brief pause on the other end. It is contained, he replied. His voice was calm, but there was something heavier beneath it. Final. Contained, I repeated softly. No further interest will be directed toward you or your daughter, he said. You have my word. I leaned back against the shelf, exhaling slowly. And what did that cost? Silence lingered for a moment longer than comfortable. Less than losing control would have, he answered. The honesty in his voice told me enough without details. So this is it? I asked. You step back into your world, and mine returns to normal. That depends, he said quietly. On what? On whether you want it to. The question landed in the center of my chest. I closed my eyes, picturing Lily's drawing on the refrigerator. The sun in the corner. The house outlined in bright crayon. Safe. Ordinary. I had wanted that more than anything. I do not belong in your world, I said finally. You saved my life, he replied. That created a connection whether you acknowledge it or not. I opened my eyes. Connection does not mean ownership. I am not claiming ownership, he said, almost sharply. Then his tone softened. I am offering presence. The difference mattered. More than I expected. Adrian. I whispered, unsure why his name felt different today. If you stay in my life, it cannot be through shadows and parked cars. Then it will not be, he said without hesitation. I heard movement in the background on his end, distant voices, a door closing. His world pulling him back. I will give you space, he continued. But if you call, I will answer. I did not respond immediately. For the first time since the railroad tracks, the choice felt like mine. Not forced by danger. Not dictated by fear. Goodbye, Adrian, I said softly. There was a pause. Not goodbye, he replied. Just balance. The line went quiet. I stood there for a long moment, phone still in my hand, listening to the hum of the hospital around me. The threat might have been contained. The shadows might have retreated. But something had shifted permanently. Because the truth was, my life had returned to normal. And normal no longer felt the same. Normal lasted 4 days. For quiet, careful days where no black vehicles waited outside my apartment and no unfamiliar cars lingered near the hospital. I told myself that was proof of balance. I drove Lily to school without checking the rearview mirror every 30 seconds. I slept through the night without jolting awake at every passing engine. I almost convinced myself that the chapter had closed. Almost. On the 5th evening, I was folding laundry on the couch while Lily practiced spelling words at the kitchen table. The television played softly in the background, some cooking show neither of us was really watching. My phone buzzed against the coffee table. Unknown number. My pulse reacted before my mind did. I stared at the screen for a full 3 seconds before answering. Claire Bennett. There was no immediate reply, just a faint sound of breathing, distant traffic. Then a male voice I did not recognize. You were near the rail yard last week. It was not a question. My throat tightened. I do not know what you are talking about, I said carefully. Silence again. Then, you interfered with something that did not concern you. The words were calm, measured, more unsettling because of it. I felt the room shrink around me. Lily's voice drifted from the table. Mom, how do you spell beautiful? I forced my tone steady. Sound it out, sweetheart. My hand gripped the edge of the couch. If this is a prank, it is not funny, I said into the phone. A soft exhale came through the line. You think he can protect you from everything? The connection clicked dead. I remained still, phone pressed to my ear long after the call ended. The air felt thin. The walls too close again. I checked the window instinctively. The parking lot looked empty. Ordinary. That word again. My hands trembled as I opened my call log. The number had already registered as unavailable. Of course it had. I did not hesitate this time. I pressed his name. He answered on the second ring. Claire. He heard it in my breathing. I did not need to explain. Someone called, I said quietly. They know. There was no surprise in his silence. Only calculation. What was said? I repeated the words exactly. I did not embellish. I did not soften. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. I anticipated a reaction, he said, but I underestimated the speed. My heart pounded. You told me it was contained. It was, he replied evenly. This is not escalation. It is intimidation. The distinction did not comfort me. There is a difference? I whispered. Yes. His voice lowered. Intimidation seeks fear. Escalation seeks damage. This is the first. I closed my eyes. And what comes after fear? A pause. Long enough to make my pulse spike again. That depends on how it is answered, he said. I looked across the room at Lily, who was now drawing stars around the word beautiful on her paper. She looked up and smiled at me, unaware that the world had shifted again. I told you I did not want to live behind walls, I said softly. You are not behind walls, Adrian replied. You are visible. And visibility invites response. I swallowed. Then what do we do? His answer came without hesitation. You do nothing different. You maintain routine. You remain steady. And you trust me to respond appropriately. Trust. The word echoed in the same place fear had lived. And if I do not want you responding at all? I asked. Silence again. He did not rush to answer this time. Then you will face this alone, he said quietly. Because the call was not about the past. It was about testing your present. My hand tightened around the phone. I understood now. The danger had not ended. It had adapted. And for the first time since the railroad tracks, I realized something far more complicated than fear. This was no longer about protection. It was about choosing which world I was willing to stand in when the shadows called my name. I did not sleep that night. I left the hallway light on and kept my phone on the coffee table within reach, the screen facing up like it could warn me before anything else did. Lily sensed the tension even though I tried to hide it. She crawled into my bed without asking and wrapped her small arm around my waist. Are we okay? She whispered into the dark. I smoothed her hair back from her forehead. We are okay, I said, and this time I meant it differently. Not because I believed danger had passed, but because I had decided I would not let fear decide for me. The next morning, I followed routine exactly as Adrian instructed. Breakfast, backpacks, school drop-off. I did not rush. I did not scan every car. I moved like a woman who refused to be cornered by a voice on the phone. But inside, my awareness was sharp. When I stepped out of my car at the hospital, I noticed him immediately. Adrian stood near the far edge of the parking structure. No convoy, no display of power. Just him, leaning against a concrete pillar, hands in his coat pockets. He did not approach until I did. You said maintain routine, I said quietly. This is my routine, he replied. His eyes searched my face, assessing more than my words. Did they call again? No, good. The single word carried weight. What are you doing here? I asked. He straightened slightly. I told you that if you called, I would answer. I also told you I would respond appropriately. I studied him. There was no visible anger. No urgency. Just focus. And how are you responding? His gaze shifted briefly toward the exit ramp of the garage. By reminding them that intimidation is not leverage. The calm in his voice unsettled me more than any raised tone could have. I do not want this to escalate, I said. It will not, he answered immediately. Because I will not allow it to. There it was again. Control. Not dominance. Not chaos. Control. And if they continue? I pressed. He looked at me fully then, and something changed in his expression. Less calculation. More personal. Then I make it clear that your name is not a variable. It is a boundary. The word boundary landed differently than territory ever had. I folded my arms, not defensively but thoughtfully. You speak like this is strategy, I said. It is. And what am I in this strategy? I asked. He did not hesitate. The reason? Silence filled the space between us. Cars passed at the lower level, tires humming softly against concrete. The world continued unaware of the invisible lines being drawn around my life. I did not ask for this, I said quietly. I know, he replied. You asked for normal. I exhaled slowly. Yes. He took a step closer, but not enough to invade my space. Then let me protect your normal without taking it from you. The words felt different from anything he had said before. Less about his world, more about mine. I searched his face for manipulation. I found none. Only resolve. My phone buzzed in my hand. An unknown number again. My pulse jumped, but I did not look away from Adrian as I answered. Claire Bennett. Silence. Then the line disconnected. Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. They are watching your reaction, he said. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Then let them watch, I replied, surprising both of us. For the first time since the railroad tracks, I did not feel like prey. I felt like a choice had been made. And this time, it was mine. The silence after that second call lasted exactly 24 hours. No unknown numbers. No lingering vehicles. No subtle reminders that we were being observed. It was the quiet before a decision. I felt it the way a nurse feels a shift in a patient's breathing before the monitors change. Subtle. Predictive. That evening, I picked Lily up from school and decided, without fully knowing why, to stop by the small park 3 blocks from our apartment. The air was cool, the sky painted in soft orange and pale blue. Children ran across the grass, laughter cutting through the fading light. Ordinary. I needed to see ordinary. Lily rushed toward the swings, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. I sat on the bench, letting the rhythm of the park steady me. For the first time in days, there were no black vehicles in sight. No visible protection. Just space. My phone buzzed again. Not an unknown number. Adrian. I watched Lily pump her legs higher, fearless, before answering. It has shifted, he said without greeting. His voice was lower than usual, controlled but carrying something. Resolved. What does that mean? I asked softly. The intimidation stops tonight, he replied. I felt a strange calm instead of panic. Because of you? Because of boundaries, he corrected. There was movement in the background on his end, distant voices, doors closing. His world in motion. You told me you did not want walls, he continued. So I removed the reason for them. I studied the playground around me. Parents chatting. A dog barking in the distance. And if they test again? I asked. They will not. The certainty in his voice was not arrogance. It was finality. I exhaled slowly, realizing I had been bracing for impact for days. You did not escalate, I said carefully. No, he answered. I clarified. The distinction mattered. Clarified what? That fear is not leverage with me. I leaned back against the bench, closing my eyes for a second. Adrian, I said quietly, I cannot live attached to your conflicts. You are not attached to them, he replied. You intersected with one. That is different. I opened my eyes and watched Lily laugh as she jumped off the swing. And now? I asked. There was a brief pause before he answered. Now I stepped back. The words caught me off guard. Just like that. Just like that, he confirmed. Your name is no longer being spoken. Your routine is no longer being observed. Your life returns fully to you. Something tightened in my chest. Relief. And something else I did not want to name. And you? I asked before I could stop myself. Silence lingered, heavier than before. I returned to balance, he said finally. I nodded even though he could not see me. Then this is goodbye. Another pause. No, he replied softly. This is choice. The line went quiet. I lowered the phone slowly, watching Lily run toward me with grass stains on her knees and a wide smile on her face. Mom, did you see me? She asked breathlessly. I pulled her into a hug, feeling the steady warmth of her small body. I saw you, I whispered. And as I held her, I understood something clearly. The fear had not defined us. The shadows had not claimed us. What remained was something simpler and far more powerful. I had stepped into darkness without meaning to, and I had walked back out on my own terms. It was almost 2 weeks later when I saw him again. Not because of fear, not because of shadows, but because I chose to look. Lily was asleep, her soft breathing steady through the baby monitor, and the apartment felt different now. Not smaller, not tense, just mine again. I stepped out onto the narrow balcony with a cup of tea warming my hands. The night air carried the faint hum of the city, distant traffic, someone laughing on the sidewalk below. Ordinary had returned fully, and yet, something in me had changed. I no longer mistook quiet for safety or presence for danger. I understood now that both could exist at the same time. My phone vibrated once on the small metal table beside me. A single message. No unknown number. No threat. Just his name. Adrian. I opened it slowly. Are you safe? 3 simple words. Not possessive. Not commanding. Just direct. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. The answer was yes. But it felt incomplete. I typed carefully. We are safe. The reply came almost immediately. Good. I could have left it there. Closed the door. Let the connection fade into something that once happened. But instead, I typed again. You kept your word. There was a pause this time. Longer. Then, so did you. I leaned back in my chair, letting that settle. I had kept my routine. I had refused to disappear. I had not let fear redraw the map of my life. The railroad tracks felt like a different lifetime now, but the vibration of steel under my shoes still lived somewhere in my memory. I realized something then that surprised me. I did not regret stopping. I did not regret cutting through rope with shaking hands. I did not regret stepping into a world I did not understand. Because in doing so, I had not lost myself. I had found the edge of my own strength. My phone buzzed again. I will not intrude, he wrote. But if you ever need balance again, call me. I smiled faintly at that word. Balance. It no longer sounded like power or strategy. It sounded like choice. I typed one final message. Take care of yourself, Adrian. 3 dots appeared on the screen. Disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, his reply came. You taught me something on those tracks. My heart slowed, attentive. What? I typed. The answer arrived seconds later. That even the most controlled life can be saved by someone who refuses to look away. I read the words twice. Then I turned off my phone and looked out over the quiet street below. No black SUVs. No shadows waiting. Just streetlights casting soft circles onto pavement. Inside, Lily shifted in her sleep and murmured something I could not hear. I went back in, locking the balcony door behind me, not out of fear, but out of habit. As I stood in the hallway, I understood something with absolute clarity. He ruled a city built on power and precision. I ruled a small apartment filled with spelling tests and bedtime stories. But that night on the tracks, for one breathless moment, our worlds had balanced perfectly. And sometimes, balance is not about who controls the darkness. It is about who chooses to bring the light.